The town no one wanted. Ethan Caldwell had not planned to buy a town. He had only meant to prove to himself that he could still win something. The online auction listing described it as abandoned commercial property, structures included. The opening bid was $70. Ethan placed it with the same detached impulse he had used to sign the papers dissolving his engagement 3 months earlier. His fiancée had called her affair a mistake. His business partner had called it complicated. Ethan had called it finished. When the notification arrived announcing he had won the entire ghost town for less than the cost of a dinner, he almost laughed. Ownership felt cleaner than love. Deeds did not lie. Contracts did not whisper apologies in borrowed sheets. 3 days later, he drove across miles of empty road until the landscape flattened into silence. The town appeared without ceremony. Sun-bleached storefronts, a church with a leaning steeple, a water tower etched with rust. Wind threaded through broken windows, stirring dust like restless memory. Ethan stepped out of his truck and listened. Nothing. Good, he thought. Emptiness was honest. He walked past the old saloon, its doors hanging crooked, and the general store with faded lettering barely clinging to wood. The air carried the faint scent of smoke. He paused. Smoke meant heat. Heat meant life. That was impossible. He followed the smell to the rear of the general store and pushed the door open. The hinges groaned in protest. Inside, sunlight spilled through cracked panes on a shelf stripped bare decades ago. Then he heard it. A small laugh, quickly hushed. Ethan stilled. A boy stepped from behind the counter, no older than 12, jaw set in rigid defiance. Behind him stood a girl clutching a ragged book and a small child peeking around her skirt. And beside them, rising slowly from a chair near a modest iron stove, was a woman. She was not what Ethan expected from a ghost town. Her dark hair was tied back simply. Her dress was worn but clean. Her posture held exhaustion and resolve in equal measure. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. Ethan recovered first. "I own this property." The words felt strange aloud. The boy's expression hardened. "No, you don't." The woman placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Noah." Then she faced Ethan. "My name is Clara Whitmore. My husband purchased this land years ago. We have been living here since his passing." Ethan's instinct was to correct her immediately, but something in her composure restrained him. "I bought it at auction last week. The county listed it as abandoned." Clara's eyes flickered, not with fear, but calculation. "It isn't abandoned." Silence settled thickly between them. Ethan studied the room more carefully now. A small cot in the corner, carefully stacked canned goods, a patched curtain dividing the space into makeshift rooms. This was not squatting. This was survival. "Your husband," Ethan said carefully. "Is he recently deceased?" Clara's chin lifted. 6 months. The younger child shifted closer to her. The girl watched Ethan with a perceptiveness beyond her years. "I have the deed," Ethan continued, softer now. "If there was a purchase before mine, it wasn't recorded properly." Clara's composure cracked for a fraction of a second. "Thomas handled the paperwork. He said everything was secure." The past tense hung heavily. Ethan recognized that tone. He had once trusted someone else with everything as well. Noah stepped forward again. "We're not leaving." It was not bravado. It was fear disguised as courage. Ethan looked around at the broken shelves, the crumbling ceiling, the stubborn stove fighting the cold. This place was barely habitable, yet they had chosen it over something worse. "I'm not throwing anyone out today," he said finally. Clara searched his face for mockery and found none. "Today," she repeated. "For now, you stay. I need time to review the records. If your husband bought this legitimately, I'll find it." He didn't know why he said that. Perhaps because for the first time in months, something here felt less hollow than his apartment back in the city. Clara exhaled slowly, relief carefully disguised as dignity. "Thank you." The word sounded foreign, as though gratitude had become rare currency in her life. Ethan nodded and turned toward the door. As he stepped outside, the wind had shifted. The town no longer felt entirely dead. It felt watchful. He spent the afternoon walking the perimeter, inspecting buildings, cataloging repairs. Yet his thoughts circled back to the woman in the store and the certainty in her voice when she spoke of her husband's purchase. Back in his truck, he opened the digital auction file. The county's foreclosure notice listed unpaid debts under the name Thomas Whitmore. Substantial debts. Ethan frowned. If Thomas had owned the town, why would it be auctioned for $70? As dusk settled, a single light flickered inside the general store. Through the dusty window, he could see Clara kneeling beside her children, dividing what looked like a modest supper into careful portions. It stirred something uncomfortable in him. He had come seeking ownership, not responsibility. Yet as darkness consumed the empty streets, Ethan realized the town was not vacant. It was burdened, and so, unexpectedly was he. He closed his laptop and looked once more at the fragile glow from the store window. Whatever truth lay buried in the records of Thomas Whitmore, it had already begun to complicate the clean simplicity Ethan had wanted. He had purchased silence. Instead, he had inherited a story, the weight of what was hidden. Morning revealed what dusk had softened. The town was not merely worn, it was failing. Roof lines sagged under seasons of neglect, boards warped outward from storefronts, and the wind carried a chill that slipped easily through cracked walls. Ethan stood outside the general store with a clipboard in hand, studying structural damage while deliberately ignoring the thin column of smoke rising again from the chimney. He had come to evaluate property. Instead, he found himself calculating how long a family could endure winter here. The door creaked open behind him. Clara stepped out, wrapping a faded shawl around her shoulders. In daylight, exhaustion traced clearer lines beneath her eyes, yet her posture remained unyielding. "You don't have to pretend we aren't here," she said quietly. "I'm not pretending," Ethan replied. "I'm assessing." She glanced at the clipboard. "And what's the assessment?" "That the buildings need repair. Urgently." "That's not new information." Her tone was measured, but it carried a hint of defiance. Clara Whitmore did not accept pity. She negotiated survival. Ethan hesitated before asking, "Did your husband leave any documentation? A deed? Receipts? Correspondence?" At the mention of Thomas, something shuddered in her expression. "He handled financial matters privately." "That's not the same as securely." Her jaw tightened. "You didn't know him?" "No," Ethan agreed evenly. "But I've known people who kept secrets." The words lingered between them longer than intended. Before she could respond, Noah emerged carrying a dented toolbox nearly too heavy for him. "The back window won't close," he announced, deliberately addressing Ethan instead of his mother. Ethan crouched to the boy's height. "Show me." Inside, the cold draft was obvious. The frame had splintered along one edge. Ethan examined the damage, then set down his clipboard. "We'll need reinforcement boards." Noah challenged. Ethan met his gaze steadily. "If you're strong enough to carry tools, you're strong enough to help." The boys studied him, suspicion wrestling with reluctant curiosity. Clara watched the exchange carefully. She had grown accustomed to men who either dismissed her children or promised more than they intended to give. Ethan did neither. He simply acted. By midday, they had secured the window. Lily swept splinters into a neat pile, while Samuel handed Ethan nails one by one with solemn concentration. The rhythm of shared labor shifted the atmosphere inside the store. It no longer felt like contested ground. It felt temporarily cooperative. Clara poured water into chipped cups. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," Ethan replied. "Cold air damages interiors." She almost smiled. "You make generosity sound like maintenance." He considered correcting her, then chose honesty instead. "I don't make promises I can't keep." Something flickered across her face, recognition, perhaps. That afternoon, Ethan retreated to the small office at the rear of the store, where Thomas Whitmore had once kept records. A battered filing cabinet stood against the wall, its lock broken. Inside lay scattered invoices, handwritten ledgers, and unopened envelopes stamped final notice. Ethan sifted through them methodically. Property tax delinquency, outstanding loans, personal notes referencing a name that appeared repeatedly, Victor Hale. The amounts escalated over time. So did the urgency of the language. Near the bottom drawer, Ethan found a folded letter sealed but never mailed. The handwriting was uneven. Clara, I never meant for it to spiral like this. Victor promised the investment would secure our future. I thought I could fix it before you ever knew. If anything happens, the sentence ended abruptly. Ethan exhaled slowly. This was not simple misfortune. It was concealment. Footsteps approached. Clara stood in the doorway, her expression cautious. Did you find something? He considered shielding her from it. Instead, he handed her the letter. She read it once, then again, as if repetition might alter the words. Her fingers trembled, though her face remained composed. He told me the debts were temporary, she said quietly. He said the town would be ours free and clear. The county auction suggests otherwise. Clara folded the letter carefully, as though it were fragile glass. Thomas believed in second chances. He trusted people who sounded confident. Ethan recognized the undertone, regret sharpened by hindsight. Who is Victor Hale? He asked. Her gaze lifted. A developer. He approached Thomas 2 years ago, claimed he could revitalize this place. And did he? He made promises. She paused. Thomas thought partnership meant loyalty. The irony was not lost on either of them. Outside, the children's laughter drifted faintly through broken glass. It was startlingly bright against the weight of adult revelation. Ethan closed the filing cabinet. If Hale financed this town and the debts went unpaid, he may attempt to claim ownership. Clara straightened. He can't. He can try. Silence pressed in again, heavier than before. Why are you helping us? She asked at last. Ethan searched for an answer untainted by impulse. Because someone should have told you the truth sooner. Her breath caught almost imperceptibly. He did not add that he knew too well the humiliation of discovering betrayal through paperwork. A distant engine interrupted the moment. They both turned toward the sound. A vehicle approaching along the deserted road, its tires crunching gravel with deliberate confidence. Clara's face drained of color. Ethan stepped toward the window. A polished black SUV came to a stop in front of the store, absurdly sleek against the decaying town. The driver's door opened. A tall man in an immaculate coat surveyed the buildings with a proprietary calm. Clara's voice was barely audible. That's Victor Hale. Ethan felt the fragile balance of the morning fracture. The past had arrived in person. Terms of ownership. Victor Hale did not rush. He closed the door of his SUV with quiet precision and surveyed the town as though he were already calculating demolition costs. His coat was tailored, his shoes unsuited for dust, and his expression composed in a way that suggested he rarely encountered resistance. Ethan stepped outside before Clara could. If this confrontation was inevitable, it would not begin with her standing alone. Victor's gaze shifted smoothly to Ethan. You must be Mr. Caldwell. The familiarity unsettled him. And you must be trespassing. A faint smile touched Victor's mouth. On the contrary, I'm here regarding unfinished business. Clara emerged behind Ethan, her shoulders squared despite the tremor in her hands. The children hovered in the doorway of the store, silent and watchful. Victor acknowledged her with a nod that carried neither warmth nor apology. Mrs. Whitmore, why are you here? She asked. To discuss the property. Ethan crossed his arms. The property was auctioned legally. I purchased it. Yes, Victor replied smoothly. For $70. A remarkably fortunate acquisition. Fortune favors the attentive. Victor's eyes sharpened. Fortune favors the informed. He withdrew a slim leather folder from his coat and extended a document. Ethan did not take it immediately. Thomas Whitmore entered into a financial agreement with me 2 years ago, Victor said. In exchange for capital to restore this town, he leveraged the land as collateral. When he defaulted, ownership reverted. Clara inhaled sharply. That's not what he told me. Victor's gaze softened in a way that felt rehearsed. Thomas was an optimist. Ethan accepted the document and scanned it quickly. The signatures appeared authentic. The language was precise. What you're presenting, Ethan said evenly, is a private contract. The county foreclosed due to unpaid taxes. That supersedes collateral claims. Victor tilted his head slightly. Only if the contract wasn't recorded properly, which regrettably it was not. Regrettably for you. Ethan corrected. Victor's composure thinned by a fraction. This land was never meant to remain a relic. I intended development. Thomas lacked the discipline to see it through. The dismissal of the dead hung heavily. Clara stepped forward. You promised him partnership. I promised opportunity. You promised security, she countered, her voice steadier now. Victor's expression cooled. Security requires competence. The insult was subtle but unmistakable. Ethan folded the document and handed it back. Regardless of your arrangement with Mr. Whitmore, the property transferred through public auction. If you wish to contest it, you may do so legally. Victor studied him more closely. You seem invested. I own it. For now. The threat was mild in tone, but unmistakable in implication. Victor shifted his attention to Clara. You don't have to remain here. I'm prepared to offer relocation assistance. Assistance? Ethan repeated. A settlement, Victor clarified. Enough to start over somewhere more suitable. Clara's eyes flashed. You mean somewhere invisible? Victor did not deny it. Silence stretched thin. Ethan watched Clara carefully. Pride warred with practicality in her expression. She had endured 6 months of isolation, defending a promise made by a man who had concealed the truth from her. Now the architect of that deception stood offering compensation disguised as mercy. What guarantee would we have? She asked. Victor's reply was smooth. My word. Ethan almost laughed. Your word, he repeated, unable to mask the skepticism. Victor's gaze snapped back to him. And yours? You bought a town on impulse. How long before you grow bored? The question struck closer than Ethan expected. I don't abandon investments, Ethan replied. People aren't investments, Clara said quietly. The remark was not accusatory, but it lingered. Victor adjusted his cuff. Consider my offer carefully. Litigation is expensive, Mr. Caldwell, and prolonged uncertainty is unkind to children. The implication was deliberate. Noah stepped out of the doorway then, his voice firm despite his youth. We're not scared of you. Victor regarded him with clinical detachment. You should be cautious of pride, young man. It often precedes loss. Ethan moved subtly closer to the boy. That's enough. Victor glanced once more around the decaying street, as if already envisioning what it could become under his control. I will return in 1 week. I expect a reasonable decision. He inclined his head toward Clara, then toward Ethan, and walked back to his vehicle without haste. The SUV disappeared in a plume of dust. For several moments, no one spoke. The wind resumed its low whistle through the buildings, reclaiming the quiet Victor had disturbed. Clara exhaled slowly. He won't stop. No, Ethan agreed. He won't. She turned to him. Can he take it? Not easily. Ethan chose his words carefully. But he can make it difficult. Noah's fists were clenched at his sides. Lily's hand rested on Samuel's shoulder, anchoring him. Clara looked at the town, the broken windows, the peeling paint, the fragile shelter it had become. Thomas believed this place could protect us. Ethan followed her gaze. Protection isn't a promise. It's maintenance. She looked at him then, searching for certainty he wasn't sure he possessed. What do we do? She asked. The question was no longer about property. It was about endurance. Ethan felt the familiar pull of retreat, the instinct to sever ties before complications deepened. He had mastered walking away, but as he watched the children waiting for reassurance, he understood something unsettling. Leaving would be easier. Staying would matter. We prepare, he said finally. We gather every document your husband left. We verify the auction process. And we make sure Hale doesn't intimidate us into surrender. Clara studied him carefully. Why? He met her gaze without deflection. Because unfinished business doesn't get to rewrite the present. The statement surprised even him. Clara nodded slowly. The town remained battered and uncertain, but it no longer felt entirely defenseless. As evening descended, Ethan realized the conflict was no longer theoretical. It had a face, a timeline, and consequences. Victor Hale would return in 1 week. And this time, the town would not greet him quietly. What cannot be sold? The week did not pass quietly. Ethan turned the general store's back office into a command center of sorts. Every ledger Thomas Whitmore had left behind was stacked, dated, and examined. Receipts were matched against bank notices. Loan amounts were compared with tax filings. Each document clarified a single truth. Thomas had been drowning long before he admitted it. Clara sat across from Ethan at the narrow desk, her fingers tracing the edges of old paper as though they might cut her. She did not defend her husband anymore. She searched for him instead, some proof that his silence had been strategy, not betrayal. He told me Victor believed in the town, she said quietly. He said investment required risk. Risk is transparent, Ethan replied. This wasn't. She looked up at him. You speak like someone who's learned that the hard way. I have. The admission settled between them without elaboration. Neither needed details to understand. In the evenings, after the children slept, they worked beneath a single lamp. The air smelled of dust and iron from the old stove. Outside, the town remained suspended between decay and possibility. On the sixth night, Ethan found something different. It was a recorded lien release, and signed, undelivered, but drafted by Thomas's attorney 2 weeks before his death. The language indicated that a portion of Victor Hale's collateral claim had been legally disputed due to predatory lending practices. If filed, it would have weakened Victor's position significantly. Why wasn't this submitted? Clara asked. Ethan scanned the date. It was prepared the day before Thomas died. Her expression shifted from confusion to dawning realization. He was fighting back. Quietly, Ethan said. She stood abruptly, pacing the small office. He never told me. Would you have believed him? Ethan asked gently. Clara stopped moving. The question was not accusatory. It was honest. Before she could answer, headlights cut across the cracked window. The black SUV returned, punctual and deliberate. He said 1 week, she murmured. Ethan rose. Then let's not keep him waiting. Victor stepped from the vehicle with the same composed confidence, though his eyes assessed the town more sharply this time. He noticed the repaired window, the reinforced beams, subtle changes. You've been busy, he observed. Maintenance, Ethan replied evenly. Victor's gaze flicked toward Clara. Have you reached a decision? Clara's posture straightened. Yes. Victor waited. We're not leaving. A faint exhale escaped him, more irritation than surprise. Sentiment is expensive. So is manipulation, Ethan countered. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. I assume you found something you believe strengthens your position. Ethan held out a copy of the disputed lien document. Your contract was contested prior to Thomas Whitmore's death. The filing was drafted. If it had been processed, your claim would have been significantly reduced. Victor accepted the paper without visible reaction. Drafted is not filed. No, Ethan agreed, but it demonstrates intent and legal awareness. Combined with the county's foreclosure, your leverage is weaker than you implied. Victor's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Intent does not equate to execution. Sometimes it reveals motive, Clara said. Victor looked at her carefully. Motive? You pressured my husband, she continued, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. You extended loans he couldn't sustain. You knew the town meant everything to him. I offered opportunity. You offered dependency, Ethan corrected. For the first time, Victor's composure cracked. Not into anger, but calculation. You're prepared to litigate? He asked Ethan. If necessary. Victor studied him in silence. This town is structurally unstable. Development requires capital you don't possess. Perhaps, Ethan replied, but ownership requires patience. The wind swept dust between them, briefly obscuring the tension. Victor turned his attention back to Clara. You believe this man's involvement guarantees safety? Clara did not hesitate. No. The answer surprised them both. I believe, she continued, that secrecy nearly destroyed us once. I won't allow it again. If this town survives, it will be through transparency. Victor regarded her with something almost like respect. Your husband lacked that clarity. My husband lacked honesty, she replied softly. The distinction hung heavily. Victor folded the document and returned it to Ethan. I will review the legal standing of this lien draft. Until then, I will suspend further action. It was not surrender, but it was retreat. "You'll hear from my attorney," he added before stepping back toward his vehicle. The SUV disappeared once more, though this departure felt less certain. Silence reclaimed the street. Clara exhaled slowly, the weight of confrontation settling into something steadier. "Is it enough?" she asked. "For now," Ethan said. The children emerged cautiously from the store, reading the absence of threat before asking questions. Noah searched Ethan's face for confirmation. Ethan gave a small nod. Relief softened the boy's shoulders. As twilight settled, Clara remained outside beside Ethan. The sky blushed faintly above the rusted water tower. "You didn't have to stay," she said. "Yes, I did." She studied him carefully. "Why?" He considered offering something guarded, something practical. Instead, he chose truth. "Because leaving when things become complicated is easy," he said. "And I'm tired of easy." Her gaze lingered on him longer than before. The town around them remained fractured, uncertain, and incomplete. Victor Hale had not conceded. The legal battle was only beginning. But something fundamental had shifted. This was no longer about an auction. It was about what could not be sold. Trust reclaimed from secrecy, dignity wrestled from debt, and a fragile beginning of something neither of them had intended to find. As the last light faded, Clara spoke quietly. "Then we rebuild." Ethan looked at the worn storefront, the patched windows, the children waiting inside. "Yes," he said, and for the first time since he had placed that impulsive $70 bid, ownership felt less like possession and more like responsibility. The week ahead would test whether that responsibility was strong enough to endure.